This is a response to AngelHairdo's video, What's with Atheists 2? Evolution is Crap, where I intend to show that the only crap in it is what's coming out of your mouth.
Atheists, they nitpick, they poke holes, they contort, they spin, they twist, they spin straw man, all damn day, but they rarely come out with what their actual beliefs are.
That has to be one of the biggest piles of shit it's been my misfortune to hear for quite a while. Not only is it an almost criminal act of hypocrisy, as we'll see later, but also it's just downright slander. Because you must be aware that YouTube contains thousands of hours of video of atheists and rational theists expounding on their beliefs both eloquently and in great detail. Now your Bible has something to say about slander, doesn't it?
If you look at the world, mostly the natural world, but also some of society, what do you see? Order? Perfection even? Well look, we breathe out, the plants breathe in, the plants breathe out, we breathe in, the sun shines every morning, the water goes round and round in its various forms, and life goes on. I don't really want to get into it right now, but you have to admit, besides all the mistakes man has made, the world is pretty close to perfect.
I need to ask you something. Are you living on the same planet as the rest of us? Because the last time I looked, the world was far from perfect. Earthquakes, volcanoes, tsunamis, tornadoes, hurricanes. Maybe your God needs to get back to the drawing board. And presumably your other examples are there to suggest that only your God, and funnily enough no one else's, is capable of creating such systems. Of course, for centuries people of your mindset have prescribed all manner of natural phenomena to supernatural agents, while rationalists have set aside puerile fantasies and instead sought to discover the truth. It was they who discovered that the early Earth was anoxic, and that all the oxygen we breathe today was generated over billions of years from the photolysis of water by early photosynthetic organisms. Oxygen that helped drive the Cambrian explosion and the evolution of obligate aerobes who continue to exchange carbon dioxide for the oxygen given off by plants to this day. And while your kind insisted that the sun was a disk that moved around the Earth, rationalists were discovering that it was in fact an immense ball of gas, and it was the Earth that was revolving around it on a path of warped space-time. And it was rationalists that discovered that water is composed of minute particles bound by electrostatic interactions, particles with a defined energy distribution that allows only the most energetic to shrug off the embrace of their brethren and escape. It was rationalists who unraveled the mechanisms of evaporation, condensation and precipitation, while your kind was satisfied with simply saying, God did it. And now that we've shown not only how but why these processes function, now that you can't ascribe them to your invisible friend, you still continue clinging to your simple-minded fables and insisting that your God is the only explanation for their existence. Just because you're incapable of understanding these concepts doesn't mean that a magic man did it, and even if one did, how can you be so arrogantly sure that it was your magic man?
I'm just wondering, do you actually have a clear understanding of the origin of species somewhere in your head?
As it happens, I do, and we'll soon find out it's a little different to the one you have in yours.
Because evolution just doesn't add up for me anymore.
I see. And have you ever considered a course in remedial arithmetic? Or even that your intellectual inability to grasp evolution's fundamental precepts doesn't necessarily invalidate its veracity?
The basic concept of evolution is that in the beginning there was nothing, and suddenly a miraculous event occurred. A huge lightning bolt struck the water, electrifying and jump-starting our great to the billionth power grandfather's brain-like piece of slime, much like a heart defibrillator or the awakening of Frankenstein's monster. Do I get that part right?
No, but I'm curious about which recreational drugs you're experimenting with at the moment. More seriously though, I have 3 points. Firstly, you're presumably talking about the origin of life, or abiogenesis. This has nothing to do with evolution, which only deals with the diversification of pre-existing life forms. Of course, if you'd bothered to learn anything about the subject before opening your ignorant trap, you'd know about that. Secondly, although the field of abiogenesis is nowhere near as developed as that of evolution, several reasonable naturalistic hypotheses for the origin of life have been advanced, and experimental evidence to support the feasibility of many of the steps in these processes has been generated in the laboratory. So even if the details are still unclear, we already know that there is no need to invoke the supernatural to explain the origin of life, and we already have more evidence for alternative scenarios than you have for your primitive and childish creation myth. And none of the suggested possibilities even closely resemble the torrent of verbal diarrhea that you just inflicted on us. What was that you were saying about straw men earlier? And finally, words just can't describe the magnitude of the stupidity that just escaped your lips. This can only lead one to contemplate three possible conclusions. Either you are breathtakingly, deliberately ignorant, or one of the leading morons on the planet, or just a fucking liar. I'll leave you to take your pick.
Every time we try to live, nature kills us. A few of us survive and reproduce and pass on their surviving genes that allow them to survive, until nature kills them again, and so on and so on, and somehow millions of vastly different species developed out of this.
Aha, so you do have some idea of what evolution actually is. Unfortunately, your understanding seems to be limited to what might be expected from a 5th grader. Also, let me make a little stab in the dark here. Homeschooled, were we? If not, your parents should be asking for a property tax refund. Now, do you realize that a more refined version of this process has been going on for billions of years? So if man can produce this, from this, in 5,000 years, perhaps it just might be possible for nature to do a little more by giving it a million-fold greater amount of time.
Our ability, our intellectual abilities far, far surpass every other species out there.
Unfortunately, some of the members of our species for some reason absolutely refuse to take advantage of them.
And don't you think that there should be something that kind of comes close? I know monkeys sort of come close, but I mean even closer. Like, shouldn't there be like subhumans or something? It just wouldn't make sense to me.
There were, and we have the remains to prove it. But evolution makes no predictions about what should be alive today. It just explains how what is alive got here. And as it happens, Homo sapiens has shared time on this planet with closer relations than the great apes. Not only were we extant with Neanderthals 30,000 years ago, 12,000 years ago, we were sharing a world with Homo floresiensis. Being closely related to us didn't give these species the right to survive, and as it happens, they didn't.
Did, like, evolution stop? Because, like, I think aren't you expecting a next mass extinction that will result in the age of cockroaches and mushrooms to keep the evolution process moving? Because it seems to have kind of come to a standstill with man on the top, and we're kind of took the reins of power a little bit from nature, it seems.
Okay, maybe those drugs are kicking in again? Perhaps you've been trying out those mushrooms you were talking about? Whatever gave you the idea that evolution stopped? It continues today just as it always has, and we've observed it happening on countless occasions. If you mean something stupid like we've never seen a mouse grow wings or why aren't humans changing, then you're obviously incapable of appreciating the utter inconsequence of a human lifetime against a vast expanse of geological time. In a slow process, large changes take lots of time. Can it be that difficult to understand? Mass extinctions undoubtedly affect the course of evolution, but it is not dependent on them and goes on regardless as competitive and ecological environments change. But it does give us another fine example of why your perfect world could do with a little more tweaking.
Because, look at us now, man. We're doing great, and I'm really glad evolution stopped, because it was starting to give me a migraine, man. And I was starting to worry it was going to change me into a werewolf or something like that, man. I don't want to be some freak.
I'm going to ignore your attempt at being humorous, and I'd like to point out that the reason that we're doing so great is because of individuals who are willing to forego the emotional security blanket of your ludicrous beliefs, open their minds, accept reality for what it is and not what they want it to be, and then strive to understand it. It has nothing to do with you or your fellow sheep who'd still be living in huts and wiping your asses with leaves if everyone thought like you do. So rather than making videos about things that you evidently know nothing about, you could do yourself a favor and educate yourself a little. Unless the University of Idaho's standards are really slipping, you can't be a complete moron. So perhaps you may even manage to learn to think for yourself, accept that you're wrong, and weave some semblance of reality into your religious beliefs. Otherwise, you'll be doomed to keep making videos whose only function will be to showcase how dumb you are.